Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Adorned with Dignity. Today we're on day 16, and today's topic surely will have many of us squirming because it takes a mirror and it puts it squarely in front of your face and leaves very little room for us to hide behind anything. I think today's topic is just so blunt and in your face and leaves little room for us to gather up excuses and to justify, some of our behavior. And today is entitled Preventing the Sin of Gazing at Forbidden Sights. And it states the fundamental prohibition of forbidden sights. And the Torah instructs us in Parsha Shlach, do not stray after your hearts and after your eyes. And this is a mitzvah to avoid thinking heretic thoughts and gazing at immoral sights. And both men and women are obligated to adhere to this ruling. So this is not just something that applies only to men. And it says women may not look at immodest pictures, yet men have additional restrictions. As the Mishnah Devorah teaches, a man who looks at a woman, even if he just gazes at her small finger for pleasure, transgresses the prohibition. And also in this prohibition that a man may not look at a part of a woman that must be covered. And it's given an example of elbows. So I'm sure knees are, part of that. But if those you think are, not permissible, how much more midriffs, necklines, those for sure will not be permissible. So it says, even if he doesn't look at it for pleasure, a man who looks at a woman for pleasure also transgresses the Torah mitzvot, and you shall safeguard yourself against anything improper, and you shall be holy. And the Rambam cautions us that even if such a person is a Talmid Chacham and does many good deeds, he will not be spared from harsh punishment. So now this, there was a study that came out, and it was based upon this very well-known thought that men think about being with a woman intimately at least every 7 seconds. Now, that was the initial thought. So they decided to do a study on this. They actually did a study on this, and they wanted to, test that theory. How often are men actually thinking about it? And the average number was 19 times. Okay, that's not including the people who are above average. And of course, there's always some that may be below average, but the average, amount was 19 times. So now let's think about this for a second, because 19 times a day for sure is far less than every 7 seconds, right? But let's just put this in perspective and context. So you walk out, you're off to work, and you're dressed improperly, and a man happens to look at you. And this is just on your way to work. Let's say you stop for a coffee, whatever. So a man looks at you, times however many men look at you. And let's say you just happen to be the object of their affection that day. Now that's 19 times however many men looked at you. And that's not even including the ones you didn't even see looking at you, right? Suddenly, they could not get you out of their mind. The way your dress was, the way your hair was, even the way you smelled. They couldn't get it out of their mind. Okay, now you go to work, times that by however many men see you there, right? And if this is repeated day after day after day, I mean, Habibi, there is no end to the amount of averot that you can acquire. This is why it's so important for a woman. And it's like, even if you didn't have the intention, like your intention wasn't that you went out and you're like, oh, I didn't want everybody looking at me. Whether that was your intention or not, that doesn't negate the fact that that was the end result. Because the bottom line is that men and women do not think the same, right? Women probably, even if they saw something, perhaps that image doesn't stay in the mind as deeply and as more frequently as it does for a man. And because we're not wired the same way, it's very hard for us to grasp that concept because we don't experience it. Just the same way, I say this to you, it's the same way when we tell a man what childbirth is like. They can, they get it in theory, but they don't really get it because they will never experience that. It's the same way here. And it's almost like Lashon Hara. It's one of those things that because of how much it can accumulate, it almost seems even more so than Lashon Hara, because let's say you just say one thing and it only affects one other person and it only gets back to one other person. Okay, that's 3. But you're talking about how many people see you per second, right? And how long they're meditating on your image. So this is something that is very, I don't think that we're aware of the severity and how frequent and easy it is to transgress this prohibition. And it says the additional stringency of looking at a married woman. And as we stated before, of course, for a man, this becomes, this is where a big portion of the Yetzirah comes to fight a man, because we've learned already that the waters are sweeter. The forbidden waters are sweeter. So when he's looking at a married woman, it's even though there's a reaction when he's looking to an unmarried woman, it's even greater, and this is just strictly a spiritual thing. So this is why it's even more important that we have to guard our modesty at all times. And it says, a man may not gaze for pleasure at an unmarried woman, yet gazing at a married woman for pleasure is a more serious sin. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, it falls it falls under the category of not looking after your eyes. But this, and he's saying that this doesn't apply to a husband who's gazing at his wife. All right, so let's keep that in perspective. And it says, indeed, the Gemara and Shulchan Aruch expounded upon the importance of a wife looking beautiful for her husband in her home. And it says, Hashem granted a woman perfume and makeup to use in order to beautify herself for her husband. And we know that together with the man, Hashem sent perfume to the women. And Rashi explains that they use this to endear themselves to their husband, not to others. And through this, they generate ahava and shalom within their homes. So, again, though we are not permitted to dolly ourselves up for other men, Hashem has for sure sanctioned the act of dollying ourselves up for our husbands. In fact, and I'm not sure if it goes into it in the Sefer, but I learned once that when Hashem made Hava, before he even brought her to Adam, he put necklaces, on her, and he kind of zhuzhed her up, if you will. And we see this again also in the desert, when the women were bringing their mirrors to help build the Mishkan. And, at first these offerings were going to be rejected. And Hashem said, no, these things are most dear to me, because the women, they prettied themselves up for their husbands. And in this way, they, all of you exist because they did this. They continued on Am Yisrael. Otherwise, they would not want to have children. They would not want to continue on. So we see that Hashem does not frown upon dolling up. He actually, he loves it. And he loves it. There are many sources that quote that Hashem really loves it when a wife kind of really goes all out for her husband. But there are probably equally, if not more so, sources that say he's not in favor of you doing it for other men, to be attracting other men. So it says, a woman's responsibility. It says, some women erroneously think that the prohibition that forbids a man from gazing for pleasure at a woman is solely a man's obligation. They are unfortunately not aware that we, as women, bear a vital responsibility. And Rabbeinu Yonah explains that a woman must be modest and careful that she doesn't cause men other than her husband to look at her, since those who look at her face her arms will be punished, and she will be held accountable for every person whom she caused to stumble, since this occurred because she did not conduct herself with tznuis. So again, we cannot go with the impression that just because we didn't have the intention of doing it, that the end result was not thus. You can put something hot on a plate and accidentally drop it. Your intention was not to break the plate. Nevertheless, the plate dropped. This is the same thing. You cannot go out there and naively think that just because you're trying to be pretty for yourself, that other people don't see it as well, and that they're not having a reaction to it, even if your intention was not to go out and to have them have that reaction. Nevertheless, it happens. So it says, Hagayon harav nisam karlet shlita, cautions, a woman is obligated to be careful that she doesn't cause other men to have forbidden thoughts. Because of her, since through this she transgresses the prohibition of do not cause others to stumble. So you have to be careful you will be held directly responsible for every single man that has these thoughts because of you. So it says, everything a person sees stays with him, whether he wants it to or not. When a man sees forbidden sight, the impact it has on him is completely different than the impact which that very same sight would have on a woman. And women need to be aware they don't understand these differences, and therefore they must simply accept Hashem's command to make every effort to conduct themselves in a way that makes it easier for men not to be attracted to them. So it says, even if we don't understand the profound significance of modesty, we should remember the innate nature of every member of Klal Yisrael. And we are compassionate, reserved, and doers of kindness. And let us regard this as an opportunity to perform kindness, a chesed, in a large segment of the Jewish population, the men. Indeed, women can help them guard their eyes through being careful with their appearance and making sure that it is restrained and modest. In truth, the more a woman conducts herself modestly, the more she is praised. She can strengthen herself in tefillah, chesed, shimras halashon, but the chief tribute she receives is for her scrupulousness in this mitzvah. As the Maharal writes, the ultimate praise and the highest level a woman can achieve is tznuis. How lucky is the woman who earns herself the title of a true tznuah. She will be praised in this world and in Olam Haba, and she will reap immeasurable schar in both worlds. So again, this is a topic that, it puts a mirror in your face and it leaves little room for the reality of what happens when we're going out immodest. And again, it's very, in this generation, very easy to do because it seems like everybody's doing it. It almost seems like it's the minhag. So if they're doing it, what's wrong with me doing it? It's a big problem. Remember, we don't, when we go in front of the Beit Din and Shemaim, we don't get to bring other people and be like, they were all doing it, so I did it. And my mom used to have this saying, if everyone was jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge, would you do it? But more than that, again, I spoke about, fakery and when something, is so rare, people seek it out. And people really, if you want to be unique, if you want to be someone who attracts something, be known for being, different, not like everyone else, for being a woman that people respected their character. And I think that's something that in our generation we lack so much of, and that is good character. And part of that, has to do with the way we're conducting ourselves, the way we are dressing. And, if for all else, if for nothing else, like the Sefer said, we are people of compassion. So, see this as an opportunity to do chesed. And because you're doing it, you're wearing this, whether it's your sniut and your tichel, whatever it is, you're going out modestly. Every second, tell Hashem, I am doing this as a chesed. And can you imagine that's going to equal up to more than any money that you can put together and give a donation on, because that's every second you're doing chesed to the men of Klal Yisrael. You're saying, I don't want them to fall on my behalf, and I'm doing this as a chesed. And really, it's one of the most greatest gifts. We are people of compassion. When we act compassionately towards others, Hashem acts compassionately towards us. So really something to think about. But there is very little room for excuses. It's very hard for us, I think, in this chapter to kind of gather up the excuses and excuse our behavior or the reason why we're going out immodestly. It really does become increasingly difficult. But that's what the amass is. We can't pretend like it doesn't exist. Ignorance will not be a defense. It's like speeding down the highway and you get pulled over and the cop says you were speeding. You say, I'm sorry, officer, I didn't know what the speed limit was. Nevertheless, you're going to have a consequence to face for that. It's the same thing here. Ignorance will just not be a defense for us. So better that we know, right? Better that we know so that we're not getting ourselves into these pitfalls. But everything will happen with Hashem's help. And Hashem will, the saying, Shemaim will help you wherever you want to go. If you want to go on the way of tznuis, Hashem will help you in that. And I promise you, He will help you. And He will help give you the desire to do it. Sometimes it just has to be from the desire. Sometimes it's not a lack of means, and sometimes you have the desire but you don't have the means, and Hashem will help you with all of this. This you can be sure of. He will help you in all of this. So I want to encourage you to really draw upon Hashem. This is a very, very difficult thing in our generation to do, but imagine, because of the difficulty, how much greater the reward is, even of that of our matriarchs who practice tzniut in a time where everyone was modest. So imagine, it's so much harder for us, but however great the difficulty and the effort you have to put in, that's how much the reward is. And certainly we don't do it for a reward. We do it because it gives Hashem nachas. But if you need an incentive, there it is. So at least for today, that's it. And I hope we'll all be together again soon. B'ezrat Hashem.